Oak, you ever had someone take something from you? Something you built with your own two hands, and think you wouldn't fight back?
Yeah.
That's what they thought about me. They thought I'd roll over, let 'em dig through my land, run their shiny new pipeline, and smile while they drained me dry. But they didn't know one thing. When you back a man into a corner, especially a man who's buried his roots deep into the soil of his ranch, you better be ready when he fights back. Because when the HOA stole my water, I didn't just fight them in court, I bought the whole damn source. And I dried them out. It started like any other quiet Texas morning. The sun was just climbing over the ridge, spilling gold across the dry grass, and the only sound was the wind whispering through the mesquites. I'd been up since dawn, fixing the old fence near the west pasture. That land, every acre, had been in my family for 3 generations. My granddad built this ranch from nothing, and my father died on it. So, yeah, it wasn't just land to me. It was legacy, blood, and soul all stitched together under that blazing Texas sky. That's why when I felt the ground start to shake, I thought it was thunder at first. But then came the metallic roar of machinery. Heavy, grinding, uninvited. I climbed the ridge, and that's when I saw them. A line of trucks, yellow diggers, and men in bright vests cutting through my north field like they owned the place. What in the hell? I muttered, hopping into my old Ford and tearing down the dirt road. When I got there, one of them, a stocky man with a clipboard, barely looked up as I stopped the truck. "Can I help you?" he asked, like I was the intruder. "Help me? You're on my land!" I barked, pointing toward the torn-up field. He gave this slow, annoyed sigh. "We've got authorization from the High Point Homeowners Association. We're laying a water supply line for the subdivision. Shouldn't take long." Authorization. I felt my blood start to boil. "You got authorization to trespass and dig through private property." He flipped through his papers. "Says here the line runs through the communal easement." "There's no easement on this land?" I snapped. "This ranch ain't part of any subdivision." The man just shrugged, waved to his crew, and they kept digging. The machines roared back to life, the augers chewing through the soil like teeth through flesh. That night, I barely slept. I dug through every deed, every map, every scrap of paperwork I owned, and there it was, clear as day. No easement, no shared rights, nothing. They'd built their pipeline illegally. But when I called the county office, they gave me the runaround. "It's complicated," they said. "We'll have to investigate." Weeks passed, and the machines kept digging. The HOA's new subdivision up the hill, those shiny new homes, those smiling families, they all started using my water. I watched as the grass near my wells grew brittle. My cattle's troughs ran lower each week. The creek that had never gone dry, not once in 50 years, was now a trickle. I went to the HOA president, a slick man named Richard Vaughn. He smiled like a politician, shaking my hand like he thought he was doing me a favor. "I assure you, Mr. Carson, everything's within our rights," he said, voice oily smooth. "We'll compensate you if necessary." "Compensate me?" I leaned in. "You stole my water, Richard. You bled my land dry." He just chuckled. "It's progress, Mr. Carson. You can't stop it." But see, he was wrong. Because that night, under the wide Texas sky, I stood by my dying creek and made a promise. To my father, to my land, and to every drop of water left in those stones. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make them feel what they'd done. They took my water. So I'd take their source. And when I was done, not a drop would flow to their pretty little lawns ever again. 3 months. That's how long it took for my land to start dying. The grass that used to sway like a golden ocean had turned to brittle straw. The cattle drank from muddy puddles. And every time I passed that pipeline, my pipeline now, I felt the burn of betrayal all over again. The county had done nothing. The HOA had doubled down. They had lawyers, influence, and a smug sense of invincibility. And me, I had silence, dust, and a will harder than the stone under my boots. I stopped fighting with papers and started listening to whispers. You'd be surprised what a man can learn when he sits quiet in a feed store or shares a drink at the bar with the right old timer. That's how I found out where that shiny new HOA pipeline got its water, a spring high up in the hills, about 20 miles north, feeding a private reservoir owned by a company that supplied the whole subdivision. So, one night, under a sky full of stars, I drove up there. The air was cold and clear, and the moon made the hills glow like silver. I parked by the gate, old and rusted, padlock dangling, and climbed through. The spring was smaller than I expected, bubbling out of the rocks into a crystal pool that shimmered in the moonlight. I knelt beside it, dipped my hand in, and felt that same chill run through me. The kind that whispers this is where it began. That's when the idea hit me. Not anger, not revenge exactly, but justice. If they could steal water through corruption and greed, maybe I could take it back the honest way. By owning it, I found the land deed the next week. The spring sat on an unused parcel owned by a shell company. A company that hadn't paid taxes in years. It took some digging, some quiet phone calls, and a long meeting with a lawyer who believed in doing what was right. But after a few weeks, it was done. That spring, their source, was mine. I remember the day the paperwork cleared. The lawyer handed me the folder, smiled, and said, "You're the new owner of Blue Hollow Springs." I walked out of that office and stood in the sunlight, holding that folder like it was a loaded weapon. By the time the HOA found out, it was too late. They tried to bluff, sent letters, threats, offers of money. But the law was on my side now. I owned the source, and that meant I controlled their water. When I shut off the main valve, it wasn't out of spite. It was out of principle. I gave them 30 days' notice, sent official letters warning of the change. Still, they ignored me. They thought I was bluffing. But on the 31st day, as the sun rose over High Point subdivision, the sprinklers sputtered dry. Faucets coughed air. The pristine lawns turned brown within a week. Panic spread like wildfire. And me, I just watched. One evening, Richard Vaughn, remember him, the HOA president, showed up at my gate in his shiny SUV, dust cloud trailing behind him. He looked different now. The confidence was gone. He was sweating, desperate. "Carson," he said, voice cracking, "we need to talk." I leaned on the fence, quiet. "You've made your point," he continued. "The whole neighborhood suffering. Kids, families, please, just turn it back on. We'll pay whatever you want." I stared at him for a long moment, then said softly, "You remember when I came to you? When my cattle were dying, when my creek was dust? I asked for help, you laughed." He swallowed hard. "That was a mistake." I nodded. "Yeah, it was." I opened the gate, walked past him toward the barn, and called over my shoulder, "You can have your water back when you do right by the people you wronged. Buy it fair, fix the land you tore up, and apologize to every man and woman whose property you disrespected." He didn't say another word. Just stood there, silent as the dust around his shoes. It took them 6 months to meet every condition. They rebuilt my creek, restored the fencing, and paid damages. Not because they wanted to, but because the town turned against them. Folks finally saw what greed looked like when it dried up their taps. When the valve was opened again, the water flowed clean and clear, humming through the pipes like a song returning home. But something in me had changed. I realized it wasn't just about revenge, it was about respect. For the land, for fairness, for the quiet power of standing your ground when the world tells you to bow. Now, when I walk that ridge at sunrise, the air smells like rain again. The grass has come back green and strong. My father's windmill spins slow and steady in the breeze. Sometimes I stop by the spring, the one that started it all, and watch the water bubble out of the rocks. It's mine, yes, but it belongs to the earth first. And every now and then, I see one of those HOA folks drive by, slowing just enough to look out across the fields. They don't see a man who got even. They see a man who stood up. Because out here, in the wide open where the sky meets the dust, justice doesn't come from lawyers or signatures. It comes from grit, patience, and knowing when to turn off the tap. Moral of the story: never underestimate the quiet ones. The world might try to drain you dry, but if you stay rooted, if you hold on to what's right, it can make the rivers run your way again.